Well, this is the day the Lord has made, and we're here to rejoice and be glad in it. I want to welcome you to Hope TV on today, and it is my prayer that you're being safe and that you're being blessed. I want to thank you for tuning in on today. As you know, we started our first broadcast on March 19th called Pastoring in a Pandemic, and our initial aim was just to reach out to maintain connection with the people in our congregation. And amazingly, God has blessed it tremendously. We've come from one program to now we're offering 34 different programs each week. We've had well over 12 million viewers in the first 2 months, 12 million views of our content in the first 2 months. And I just want to thank you for your support. Because of your support, you've helped us to bring positive and uplifting content that's been Christ-centered. Our aim is to bring programming that ministers, of course, spiritually, mentally, and physically. And so we undergird everything we do here with the perspective on faith, on family, on fitness and finances, and even try to interject some fun along the way. And so if you've tuned in today, you're watching the one-on-one broadcast today. It's a special edition broadcast, and I believe this is going to be the most impactful show that we've had since the pandemic has begun. And I want to just thank you again. If you've not yet followed us, please take this moment to follow us on all things social media at the Hope TV. And I just want to thank you. Drop us a line. Let us know the city and state from which you're viewing. We take your viewership very, very seriously. And if you're watching through a medium, whether it be Apple TV or Roku TV, Twitch, Amazon, YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, the church website, my website, or the church apps, if you're watching through a medium that will allow you to subscribe, to like, to comment, or to share, please do so now. Please pause and do so now. This is going to be a transformative time of sharing. And I want you to send that link to about 5 people right now, because, of course, in these times, we need some positive content, something that's Christ-centered, and most important, something that centers on love and redemption and peace. And I believe this conversation is going to be very, very needed and very, very helpful for the times in which we live. So thank you so very much just for sharing with us today. Please feel free to list your comments or your questions as you're viewing, because we take it very, very seriously. You know, it's been probably 25 years now, I believe, when I met our guest for today. I was preaching revival in Warner Robins, Georgia, at Fellowship Bible Baptist Church. My late mentor, Dr. Willie Reed, served there for many years. And actually, the church was founded in 1980, and preaching revival. And his son, Dr. Reed's son, my god brother, god nephew, played football for Warner Robins High School and had a lot of friends. And I was blessed to meet our guest then when he was a high school student. You know, we just took a liking to each other immediately. I was a little older than him, but he was not just a young athlete and high school student, but a quarterback. And of course, I played quarterback in high school and football as well. So we just had a lot of similarities, and we shared a love for the gospel. And now our relationship has expanded over 20 years. And I'm excited to have him with us today. It's going to be an incredible story and an incredible time of sharing. Let me welcome to the Hope TV, the one-on-one special edition broadcast today, Pastor Jeremy Morton. What's going on, Jeremy?
Pastor Dewey, it's so good to see you today, my friend. The only thing better would be to be with you in person and to hug your neck. You are my longtime friend and brother, and I'm honored to see you and to speak with you today. And God bless you and your family and your ministry, and I'm honored to just share with you. I'm excited about this moment. Every time I'm with you, Dewey, it energizes me and encourages me. You have that about you, and I praise God for our friendship. It's indeed rich. And let me, if I could say this and not get emotional, one of the things I look forward to about heaven, Dewey, is the unending, unbroken circle of friendship with brothers like you that I will enjoy. When I'm with you, the time always passes too quickly, but I love every moment I get to spend with you. God bless you, Dewey. Thank you.
Man, you're amazing, brother. Tell us about your journey, Jeremy. I know from high school to your early church affiliation, academic journey to where you are right now.
Well, Dewey, my life is a tribute to the grace of God and to godly Christian parents and to a wonderful home church where I was raised in Warner Robins, Georgia. My parents, Gary and Jan Morton, are my heroes. They are godly. They serve full-time in ministry. And I will say that perhaps the thing God's used most about my parents is the consistency of their integrity. They're the same person Monday through Saturday that they are on Sunday. And God's used that in my brother's life and in my life to be a rich, positive testimony to the power of Christ. So I was born and raised in Warner Robins. I came to know Christ as a 7-year-old boy. Dewey, I know this is crazy, but you'll understand. When I was 14, I really sensed God calling me to be a preacher. What do you know about anything at age 14? But I sense God's hand calling me to be a preacher. And I even now can say that I'm more sure about that calling than I am my own salvation experience. Of course, I know I'm born again and I'm a child of God, but I vividly recall God calling me to vocational service at age 14. So I began to preach at age 15, 16. I played sports. I was in high school. It was a novice ministry type thing, but God used it. So I went to Warner Robins High School. I went to Bruton Parker College, which is a small Christian school in South Georgia between Macon and Savannah. During that time, we planted a church where I was in Perry, Georgia. I was there for about 13 years. God blessed our ministry there. From Perry, I went to First Baptist Church Cartersville, where I served for 5 years. During this time, I finished college. I did seminary at New Orleans Baptist Theological Seminary along the way. I began my doctoral studies, which hopefully I finished this year. I hope I'm in my last year of that. I plan to be. And now, Dewey, I'm at First Baptist Church in Woodstock, Georgia, which is just on the north side of Atlanta. And I've been privileged to be here almost 2 years. So God's been good in my life and in my ministry. The best thing about me is my wife, Carrie. She and I have been married 16 years. We have 3 children, Zeke, Mady, and Abe. And I'm grateful. My life is the story of the grace of God and good people that have encouraged me and spoken life into me all along the way. I am what I am because of the good people that have cheered me on and encouraged me and supported me. So I praise God for that.
You know, it's been amazing to watch your journey. I mean, me seeing you grade from high school. I remember when you went to Bruton Parker, when you started Cross Point, you know, come and preach for you there. You know, you were preaching
Yes.
me at Beulah.
Yes.
When you made the transition, we talked about you transitioning to Cartersville, serving there,
Yeah.
and then going to First Baptist to be the successor of Dr. Johnny Hunt, to see the whole picture. When you got married, I remember when you got married. I remember when you
Yeah.
proposed. I remember those pictures when Zeke was born. So,
Yeah.
and now to see you taking him hunting or to a baseball game, it's just a beautiful story, man. And I just think what I love about our connection and who you are is, even though we're from Middle Georgia and we know that, you know, racism is everywhere, you know,
Yes.
you and I have never had an issue. I value you. I value who you are as
Yes.
much as anybody I know. I mean, even though we don't talk every day, who you are at your core, I trust and I value your heart. And I just want to figure that out, because you've always dealt with everyone with a sense of equity, and racism and superiority, inferiority has never been who you are. What do you attribute that to?
Well, Dewey, for whatever it's worth, I was raised by parents who would not tolerate for 1 second any sense of entitlement or prejudice, or for me to feel I was superior to anyone. It just wasn't welcome at our house. And you didn't choose to be black. I didn't choose to be white. But in addition to not being, I didn't choose to be white. I didn't choose to be the son of Gary and Jan Morton. And Dewey, even now, I can hear my parents say, "Hey, son, you're not better than anybody, but nobody's better than you. You're a child of God. You're our son. And as long as you live in this house, you know," and that was just put into me. And of course, through public schools in Houston County and our love for sports, I don't have a time when I wasn't raised among people who were different from me. And so that's the grace of God. That's the grace of God. And so I would say early in life, the Lord gave me the privilege of having people that were different on my team, in my life, and I was in their life. And so I could talk about that the rest of this program. But Dewey, it's the grace of God and good teaching. Racism is something that I think we learn. I think if we were to put our children in a sandbox, they may disagree and they may get angry with one another, but I don't think it's based on skin color. You know, it's ignorance and the epitome of foolishness to think you're better than somebody because of the color of your skin or theirs. The epitome of foolishness and ignorance. And here I am.
Wow, it's amazing that he had a conversation because a lot of people say they'll say passively, I'm not racist. And so from a very passive perspective, there's a difference between being passively not racist, but being
Right.
raised in a place that's anti-racism.
Sure.
And and you've always been intentional. I remember once early when you were a teenager, you used to call yourself the Black E. Dewey Smith. I'm
I
like,
did. Right.
how is this white teenage preacher going to identify himself? And maybe I know you were just joking with me and some of our colleagues, but it was mind blowing because like you, I was raised, of course, in church, and of course
Hmm.
we know churches are different in terms of population and sometimes demographics. But I went to public schools. I went to the first magnet school in Georgia, and so I've always been in diverse settings from high school. My high school, Central High School, was a diverse high school as well. But have you had an intentionality about reaching out to different people? Has it been natural? Because I think what's happening now in these times, I have some African American friends who've never had a conversation or relationship with somebody outside of their race or culture, and I think vice versa. So has that been a part of your intent? Were you deliberate about that? It's just natural? Was it just trying to figure out
Yeah.
how do we bridge these gaps between us?
Dewey, I haven't thought about that, but I can say for you personally, I was drawn to your preaching and to your authenticity. I think men in particular want to get behind a man that knows who he is and where he's going. And I've sensed that about you from the days of you preaching on local television in Macon. I remember me and Willie Reed, we would be in high school. We would watch you preach in the early days at Beulah Land. And there was something in my heart that was drawn to you. I sensed in your preaching in particular that you weren't just teaching, you felt it. You would communicate with your voice and with your countenance, with your facial expressions, but you felt it. It came from deep within you. And I remember getting on my knees, Dewey, and asking God to do that in me. Lord, I don't want to preach anything that I don't believe, and I don't want to lead any ministry that isn't from the heart of you in my heart leading me in this regard. And so that's you're preaching your authenticity. Dewey, I think for particularly the white community, because we're a majority community in America, we would do well to remember what Jesus said in the Sermon on the Mount when he said, the Gentiles like people that are like them. You think you get credit because you get along with someone who's just like you? That isn't Christian. It's Christian when you get along with people who may see it differently from you, who may view it differently from you. Part of being a Christian is not just sitting back passively and saying, I'm not racist. Well, good. I'm glad you're not racist. I mean, that's the lowest bar we can possibly set. Who are you befriending that isn't like you? Who's been at your table that doesn't look like you? Who are you reading and following and listening to that may have valid points? But we don't want to take time to listen. We don't want to take time to. How many times does the Bible say, hear, O Israel, hear, listen? Jesus said, he that has ears to hear, let him hear. Well, some of us have ears, but we're not listening. And so listening is integral to advancing this conversation. So God, for whatever reason, gave me the grace to start listening to you 25 years ago. And here we are.
Wow.
And I'm grateful for that.
You, you talked about coming up in Second Baptist, and Warner Robins and your religious, those formative years. That's something I never told you. And of course, I'm not going to put you on the spot with it, but I want to talk about it because I think I was thinking about these things and my first encounter with racism,
Mm-hmm.
particularly as it relates to an ecclesial or church perspective. My
Sure.
aunts and my grandfather lived in Antioch, in South Macon. And I
Mm-hmm.
remember I must have been 9 or 10. I would love to play football or basketball. So going to Memorial Gym, which is in South Macon. But I never shall forget this day. One day I was getting ready to go to the gym with some friends in the neighborhood. And my aunt said to me, she said, I don't want you to walk past the church. Make sure you cross the street. Don't walk in front of the church. Because if you're caught walking by that church, you may get in trouble because they don't want you on the side of the street of the church. So I must have been 9 or 10, probably at the time. And that church, it was a church I grew up watching on television all the time. So church, You know, you're familiar with it. I think you're connected with it, Carrie. But it was Mabel White,
Mm.
and I thought about it. What was it about that time? Maybe her upbringing, 50s and 60s, but they had that type of fear that something. That's when I first really realized there was a separation. Because
Sure.
how could we have that? And how could she have that negative experience of a place she had never gone? But that was a fear about a church.
Right.
And I'm trying to figure out, and I think for years there's been a fear, even in terms of racial relationships and not being able to come together because of those types of fears. Have you been familiar with that? Have you ever heard that? How do we break those walls down?
I've heard it. Obviously, I have never felt it to that degree. I don't think I could even register what I may feel. I mean, Dewey, I'm a white guy in a majority culture, and I mean this sincerely with all respect. No, I've never been told, don't go by that church. God forbid something could happen. In fact, my first experience with the black church was the complete opposite. And it's a tribute to our late friend who's in heaven, W.L. Reed. I'm so grateful for Pastor Willie Reed. When I was 8, maybe 9 years old, 10 years old, about the age that you were from your story, he was having a revival at his church. And my dad and my uncle, who was also a pastor in Warner Robins at the time, and his son, 4 of us, 4 white guys, 2 dads, 2 sons, all 4 of us white. We went without any notice to Pastor Reed's church, and he saw us walk in the door and said, "Get in here, brothers," and made us sit on the stage during revival. And so here I am, invited to fellowship church as a 10-year-old kid, and I get to sit on the stage. So we had a very different understanding of the other church, didn't we? You're being told, don't walk past that church, something bad may happen. And to Dr. Reed's credit, he invited us up and celebrated us and said, you know, Elle and I, Will, his son, and I were playing basketball. So we knew each other through basketball and sports. But he saw us from the community and immediately let his church know, these are my friends, these are my brothers. Get up here, guys. And we were like sitting on the stage, and here we are. So,
You, this it's amazing to know that about you. You preached a very courageous sermon on Mother's Day, and you sent it to me a couple of weeks ago, and I had the opportunity to listen to it. And I got to be honest with you, I was almost frightened for you, you know, because I want you to do so well, and it's almost like I'm very protective by nature and don't want you to put yourself in a position where anything would come and you know and cause challenges to your leadership. Man, how did that sermon go? What was the reception to it? Where did the impetus for that come from?
Dewey, I really feel the Spirit of God put it in my heart. It wasn't the message I was planning to preach. It was completely not in my heart until about 48 hours before Sunday. I can't even remember what I was going to preach. I was in a series, and I was made aware of the tragedy in Brunswick of Ahmaud Arbery. And I'm actually personal friends with the pastor of the majority white church, First Baptist Church, Brunswick, Georgia. Good friend of mine. I texted him and said, "Man, I'm so sorry about this in your community." And he texted me back, "It's bad. This has not been handled right. Things are ugly. It's nasty." And I trust this guy's integrity. And he shared with me, and I was like, "Really?" And I just saw it trending on social media, you know, and I didn't know much about the story, but I saw Brunswick, and I just texted my friend. And then my wife actually saw the clip of Arbery's death on video. And Dewey, I still haven't watched that video. I trust her judgment. I don't like to see things like that. Maybe I should watch it and feel it even more, but I can feel it through what I read and my wife's expression when anyways. And um, um, for whatever it's worth, God's done a work in my life through a guy named Christian Norman. I can't wait for you to meet Christian. He actually joined our staff April 1st, right in the middle of this quarantine. Christian is an African-American brother. He is a former football star at Michigan State, incredible man of God. Christian Norman, he's our new associate executive pastor here at First Baptist Woodstock, just an incredible guy.
Wow.
And I just texted Christian and I said, "Hey, man, what do you think about this?" And he said, "Jeremy, I know it's in your heart for us to love all people. If God puts it in your heart to address this and your message, do it." And so I said, oh my goodness, here's Christian, who I love and trust, saying, this is not just a hot button issue in our culture right now, the tragedy of Arbery's death, but it's important to maybe make this a teachable moment. So, Dewey, long story, I got on my knees and I said, God, what do you want me to say? And the message was just the result of what I really sensed God put in my heart. Dewey, 98% of the people that watched it were so positive and so supportive. And I mean, um, whites, blacks, Latinos, but there were a few that objected, and they sent me very personal messages. Dewey, most of them are older white people that, for whatever reason, are from a different time and place. I can't go back and reverse how someone may have viewed relationships between blacks and whites from a bygone era, but I didn't back down when they said, I can't believe you would preach this. And I said, well, I'm going to stand before God, and standing before God makes me more fearful than a nasty email that somebody might send me complaining about my sermon. So I'm not, I really sensed it was from the Lord. And I hope, Dewey, it's the beginning of ongoing conversations. We, by God's grace, have become increasingly diverse here at First Baptist Woodstock, and I welcome that. We celebrate that. And I'll say this, our church does too. I have a great church here. My predecessor, Pastor Johnny Hunt, he's a Native American. He's an Indian. So I don't know if it was the foundation of his ministry that's prepared our church for this time to say, we welcome and celebrate that every nation and tribe and tongue that God wants to raise up from Woodstock to the world is welcome in this church. But it's happening here, and I'm grateful.
You said a whole lot right there.
Probably too
Particularly,
much.
no, it's beautiful. But I want to really press this piece about, we can't believe you preached that, because there are a lot of people. I mean, people much smarter than me, and who really believe that to address those types of issues, that the answer to America's problem, the answer to racism, is to simply preach the gospel. And
Yeah.
if you say anything that's dealing with any social or racial issue, then you're not proclaiming the gospel. Can you talk about that? Because I know the gospel is the life, the death, the burial, the resurrection, the ascension, and the second return of Jesus. I
Right.
know that Christ can change the hearts of people. I believe in preaching that. I believe Christ is the hope of our salvation. But to say that because I deal with something that's racial, I'm not preaching the word, I'm not preaching the gospel. What do you say to those people who feel that?
Well, maybe we should flip that script. Because of the gospel, this is what we must do. It's easy to talk about the gospel. And for whatever it's worth, this is just my personal observation. The people that talk about the gospel the most are often the people that share it the least. It's Christians in an echo chamber talking about the gospel. Well, ain't nobody being changed by it while Christians debate with one another about it. If these people who talk about the gospel and less definition of it, more declaration of it might be helpful in our culture. So all these people, the gospel, the gospel compels us to go. And when we go, we share it with everyone we can. So the people that, in my church, the people that objected to the message would say this to me in private. They would say that you got political. Why do you have to bring in? And I don't view what's happened with George Floyd or Ahmaud Arbery or Trayvon Martin, or go down the list of tragedies. It's so much more than politics. It's sin, and it's anthropology, it's depravity, whatever you want. But we have to learn. We have to do better. We need God to rescue us from this as a nation. And so it's easy to sit in our homes and say only the gospel can change someone's heart. Well, good. Well, whose heart are you knocking on the door of their heart through a cup of coffee or a lunch or a drive across town together or a walk through the park? We got to be, why I love you? Because we've been together. I'm not just seeing you from afar, and I know who you are because we spent time together. And if that would happen for all of us, how much value, how much progress can be made? And so I wanted to kind of throw the flag in the sand on Mother's Day and just say, here's what I believe, and here's where our church is going, and call that what it was, which was out of the pit of hell. What happened in Brunswick that day was out of the pit of hell, and what happened with George Floyd is out of the pit of hell. And yes, I know sin is tragic, but Christians can't just say it's. We got to do something about it.
Wow. You talked about Christian Norman, your new executive pastor there.
Right.
How has the reception been? Because, I mean, that's not in response. That's not knee jerk. You're not
No,
being reactive to the things that have happened with Arbery and Breonna Taylor
right,
and George Floyd. This happened, before April.
right.
So that was some foresight prior to
Yeah.
some intentionality. What led to that, brother?
Well, just every card on the table. I did some demographic study in the communities around our church. We're located our main campus on Highway 92 in Woodstock, Georgia, and we're just north of Cobb County, which has become increasingly urban and multi-ethnic. And our church community is going to become increasingly ethnic and more diverse because of the neighborhoods in our community. And right now, where we are within 5 miles of our church is like 82% Caucasian, but that number is gonna go down, and the diversity number is gonna go up in the next 10 years. And I don't want to 10 years from now wake up and go, man, I need not everybody to look like me. I'm going, who can I get on our leadership team that will be ready for the communities and our city to be one to Christ? And God just put through relationship with some other guys on staff. Christian Norman, we can't say his name yet, but Dewey, I'll tell you this. Me and you can talk about anything. We have a new next generation pastor, our college minister. He's joining our staff July 1st. It's not public yet, but he's also an African American brother who's joining our teaching team. He'll also be on our teaching team. So I, I, I just really believe God put it in my heart to surround myself with people who believe just like you and I believe, but they don't look just like Jeremy Morton looks, and they don't necessarily think like Jeremy Morton thinks, which is a good, healthy thing. I believe in the plurality. I'm the leader, but I believe, like Jethro told Moses, you try to do all this by yourself, you're gonna be in bad shape. I need to have people around me on the team that their strengths complement mine, and part of that is where we're from and how we were raised and how we think and who we can reach. And so here we are.
Wow. But here's the thing, it's so organic for you. Some people having to do this and it's difficult to be
Yeah.
reflective because sometimes people say we're multi-ethnic or we're multicultural because they have a few people in the choir,
And it's
or on the worship teams. But when you're talking about the sharing of power and the giving of opportunity is so huge and so novel, particularly when you think about a Southern Baptist church. When you look at the history of Southern Baptists, who would have ever imagined that a Southern Baptist church will be this thoughtful and this reflective and this concerned about representing the entire community? It's just, I'm not shocked. And I know Dr. Hunt's ministry, but with you doing this so soon, it's just absolutely mind blowing for me.
Well, I praise God for the support of the people. I got a lot of people praying for me. Dewey, I hope, I think God's going to do what he wants to do with or without me. I just want to be in on
Mm,
it. I sense
my God.
he's going to do a special work, just like he's doing through House of Hope. What a special work. There's an anointing on your ministry. I feel like God's given us an anointing too. And whatever he wants it to look like, my yes is on the table. I put my yes on the table when I said I would come
Mm,
here. God's the one that's writing the story. I just got to be faithful. And so I'm looking for faithful men and women to join the team. And we don't say, um, hey, what color are they? And Christian has been so good in private conversations with me about helping me learn, Dewey. He asked me at our first meeting almost a year ago, and I said, I really am sensing I'm drawn to you. And why do you just want to have a black guy on your staff? And I said,
wow.
what would make you think that about? And so and he explained to me what tokenism is and how if it's just a head
Wow.
nod, I'm not interested. But if it's a heart
Wow.
connection, partnership, I'm interested. And I said, I want my children to grow up in a church. And I want my children to know their father as a pastor who is a kingdom man, who is kingdom minded. When I say I want to be faithful in every nation and tribe and tongue represented, it's going to be represented in heaven. What will God make it look like in my church? I mean it. I really mean it.
You know, it's amazing that you guys had those conversations. We had breakfast some years ago. I never shall forget.
Yeah,
I think we were for Forsyth. I think you were still in.
yeah,
You may have still been in Senegal at the time in Perry,
yeah,
and
yeah,
we were
yeah,
talking. I think it's during the election or something, maybe.
yeah.
And we were talking about the Tea Party
Mm-hmm.
and its Christian origins, and you were like, you know, things have gotten, somewhat liberal, and we talked about those things because
Yeah,
I'm not given to one party. We'll talk about that later in a
right.
moment, but you said something about, yeah, I want to take the country back. You remember that conversation?
Vividly, Dewey, and you gave me a word from the Lord that I have used many times. So the conversation went like this: "Hey, Dewey, John McCain's going to take the country back. He's going to take it back." And you said you were in the middle of eating grits and eggs, and you said, "Take it back where? Take it to Jim Crow? Take it to the Civil War? Take it where my daddy can't drink out of the same drinking fountain as your daddy? How far back are we going to take it, Jeremy?" And I mean, I dropped my fork. Uh, wow, I never thought about that. So the verbiage and the language of, man, take the country back. As a white guy, I'd never even thought of that. But you saw it differently, and you helped me. And let me say this: since you said that, I've been careful about when I speak about the good old days. Well, good old days. Who are we talking about? Good old days is a very subjective term, isn't it? So good for who? Good when? I want to be mindful of that. With Black Lives Matter, Dewey, um, I want to have my language right, but I want it to be from a heart that is right. And my heart is to be a lover of all people. You are a lover of people. I want to be a lover of people. The second great command, right? Love God, love your neighbor like yourself. Well, who lives next door? He might be a Muslim. It might be someone in the LGBTQ community. It might be someone from Asia or Africa. It might be a businessman that's making all kind of money, but he's doing it unethically. Who is your neighbor? You got to figure out how to love him. And it's got to be natural. And it's got to be it's got to be the love of Christ. And you helped me with
You
that day.
know,
I remember.
it's just so powerful to hear you say these things because I think us not having these conversations, whether it be law enforcement, whether it be, some of my other, white counterparts who talked about the race card being played too much and people who are race baiting. So if I say something about George Floyd and their estimation. So I think a lot of what we've seen on television and propaganda and the news outlets, they have their own agendas, whether it be conservative media or the more liberal media. It's with the way they push their causes, I think it's furthered the wedge and the divide, and so, Governor Deal and I had a great relationship with Governor Deal and supported him because I saw so many things that he did. So people would ask me in my own counterparts, why are you in the governor's mansion? Why you love
Right.
Nathan Deal so much? Why is it when Nathan Deal calls you, you go? Well, for me, I saw his heart. I saw what he was about. I spent a lot of time with him.
Right.
And so me being a black guy, an African American, supporting a Republican governor was not an issue in that regard because I saw what he was about. I saw his heart for
Sure.
alternatives for school in terms of charter school. I saw his heart in terms of trying to do reentry and prison reform, and those were
Yeah.
areas that I just respected him so much. So instead of me trying to draw circles, lines, I want to draw circles. What are some of the things I want to ask you a very a candid question? I want you to be honest with me, and I know you will. I won't put you on the spot, but I want you to be honest. What are some of the things that you heard from that 2% in your church, other white friends, things that they feel that those of us who are African Americans who may be loud about or vocal about, what is the thing that keeps some of your counterparts from connecting to us? Because I want to hear that. I told you about the
Yeah.
piece with taking the country back, but I want to, because it goes both ways. If we're not
Yeah.
learning from each other, then we can't
Sure.
grow. But what are some things I want to parse that and press that to see what are
Great
some of the
question.
things so we can educate ourselves? Because if we gotta
Sure.
we gotta bridge this gap somehow. We gotta bridge it.
Well, Dewey, I think many white Christians, I can only speak for my own tribe, but many white
Yeah.
Southern Baptists They have a misguided understanding of the kingdom. In Acts 1, when Jesus told his disciples, I'm going to send the Spirit, stay in Jerusalem, I'll ascend to my Father, but it's to your benefit. I'm going to give you the Spirit. And they said, is this now the time when you restore the kingdom to Israel? And Jesus says, don't be, you don't misunderstand what I'm saying. You go make disciples of all people, Jerusalem, Judea. So, they're looking for a political kingdom that's going to overthrow Rome. And Jesus is saying, my kingdom is not of this world. My Father has a different agenda. So I think many of the Caucasians that you are addressing, they have a different understanding of the kingdom, and it's political and it's Republican and I'm a proud American and you're a proud American. We're grateful to call this
Indeed.
country home, but they view the future and this uh, nostalgic desire to have a paradise on earth. It doesn't look like the one that the Bible's talking about. I mean, Jesus said, in this world you will have tribulation, but be encouraged, I've overcome the world. And
Wow.
Dewey, they want it to be. I don't know if without. I know this is personal. Some of them, they might be angry that the South lost the Civil War, and they maybe would be nervous to say it out loud. But maybe they are. Maybe they're still mad about a war that they weren't even here to see fought. Um,
Wow.
maybe they, maybe they are afraid. I think a lot of us fear. I think you're different from me. You look different from me. Therefore, instead of me learning who you are and learning how to relate to you and having a new friend, it's easier to keep you at arm's length than call you someone I'm suspicious of.
Wow.
It's ignorance. And it's the devil. The devil wants to divide us. Um, I don't know, Dewey. I, I
That's
if
good,
I
man.
thought about this, well, yeah, I'm not sure if I'm being helpful to give you, but they have
You,
they're longing for a kingdom that is not the one God's interested in building. God doesn't need the Republicans or the Democrats. He doesn't need America. God can do whatever he wants to do with or without us. And the joy of being a Christian is that we are invited to have a front row seat and be a participant. But some, the people that I know, people, they'll get emotional. And let me say this. I love America. I'm from Warner Robins, military town, proud. I know Christians, man, you play Lee Greenwood and God bless the USA, and man, they get emotional and amen. Well, you ask them to stand for the reading of God's word, and they just act on, well, I got to stand. Whoa. Oh, you'll stand for the president, you'll stand for the flag, but you're not standing for Jesus, you know. And we see it, we see it. You see it, and I see it too. But only it's disappointing to learn it about people that I thought we'd come further than this, Dewey. That's what I guess I'm embarrassed to say this out loud, but I thought our country had made more progress than this. I thought because of the euphoria that I was raised in, I'm from paradise in Warner Robins with godly parents. Man, my parents, if they thought I was racist, they'd have kicked me out. I mean, like, not everyone was raised that
that's
way.
true.
And I didn't choose my parents. It's the grace of God. I'm 38 years old going, I'm shocked that we still have adults who can drive and vote and go to the grocery store. They really think they're better than someone because of their skin color. God help us. God help us. But it
Yeah,
exists, Dewey.
you're right. I think what has happened, and for me, and I don't know, a couple of things. I do think that there is a fear of the country, getting away from its Christian origins, and again, even that's subjective, as you said earlier, because people say, okay, America's a Christian nation, found on Christian principles, but we all have to admit, can't sanitize the reality that a lot of things that America has done haven't been necessarily most Christian, and
Right.
so what happens is, so somebody like me, who's from an urban community, raised, and you see the things that are happening from a policy perspective. And so for me, I'm very moderate. I'm very open. I'm not given to one party. So what happens, I think politics have destroyed, I think a couple of things. Number one, I think some people are afraid of the country, maybe some Caucasians may be afraid of the country not being majority any longer. I do think that may
Sure.
be a fear for some, but I also
Yes.
think what liberalism for many people and this whole thing of secular humanism. And so for many people, when you talk about issues like same-sex marriage or abortion, where most Christians, we have our thoughts on it, and we know what we believe the Word of God says in terms of marriage between a man and a woman. You know what I
Yes.
mean? And but
Yes.
at the same time, we have our theology on this side, and then we have policy on this side. And so the issue that a lot of African Americans are having is, okay, which party do I vote for? Because if I vote for the Democratic Party, then they may be adhering policies that don't line up where I am from a theological perspective. But if I go to the Republican Party, okay, they may share my views on same-sex marriage and abortion, but the policies against me as a brown or black person are
Yeah.
diametrically opposed to my humanity.
Yeah.
So I think that whole division piece of what is theology and what is policy, and realizing I think that America is not our home, but I think that's another thing that
America.
separates us.
Yeah. Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
Dewey, I think the same people that are selling us the problem are the same people trying to sell us the solution. I think
Mm.
I don't want to get all conspiracy here, but if we are drinking the Kool-Aid of one party, we've missed it. I think
Wow.
that the Republicans make great points. I think the Democrats make great points. I think the problem is that we live in such an angry, cynical, bitter, power hungry age that we can't have honest dialogue. We can't work together. I think social media, Dewey's made it worse. People can hide behind a Twitter handle or a computer screen, whether you're the president or the man on the street, and you can say anything about anybody, anytime, with zero consequences in this life. God knows, hey, Matthew 12:36, every word that comes from your mouth, you're going to stand before, or every word that comes from your Twitter, you're going to stand before God and give an account for. But we don't believe that. People don't live like that. And so I think, my father, this is very personal. My dad always told me, Dewey, that if I fell in ministry, it would be because power, money, or immorality, an inability to be morally pure. And so if it's not money that we're after or a woman that we're after, maybe it's being in charge. And I think that's a great word. That's what I meant about when I said some might be frustrated that the South didn't win the Civil War. Well, sore losers are people who are really afraid of, they don't know what it's like to walk into a room and be a minority, which is precisely why I think we
Wow.
should listen to minorities. They don't, man, we've had the upper hand all our life. And the thought of not having the upper hand, I'm scared. I'll do it. I'll vote and
Wow.
say and raise money and do whatever I got to do to not have a future where I won't have the upper hand. People are scared at the notion of losing control. But part of being a Christian is waking up every day with a joy and knowing only one is in control, and his name is the Lord Jesus Christ. And I rest in the fact that it's his kingdom, not mine. I just get to participate in it.
Wow. Man, I love you so much, man, and I can't wait till this thing subsides with COVID, so we can go to the football game because we haven't caught a game in a while. Because Zeke, and I, we
Love
went to call the
it.
Falcons game a couple years ago.
Yep.
And you get ready to start back worship. You haven't been in public worship since March. You're
That's
going
right.
back this weekend. Tell us about how that's been and what kind of steps have you taken? Because a lot of pastors are trying to figure out how do we
Yeah.
prepare. What kind of recommendations do you give in terms of preparing to go back in? So what is that going to look like for you this weekend?
Well, Dewey, I'll say this. We started preparing about 6 weeks ago, not knowing when we could come back, but we have circled June 14th as the date. And I'll tell you, we have a lady on our leadership team here. Her name is Monique Johnson. Again, I know this is so personal, but I just feel freedom with you. Monique is a black woman, and she's on our lead team. She is one of the most intelligent and gracious and sharpest people I've ever known. She was the leader of our Thrive ministry, which is our ministry to people with special needs. She March 1st, long before we knew about COVID, assumed a new role here on our leadership team where she's the director of connections. Her job is to help us assimilate people. So when we now go, how are we going to get back to church? Well, naturally, that's Monique. She's speaking into that and she's leading it. And do we hear, that's a long story to say. It's interesting how I'm a preacher. I'm just ready to get back to church. I'm ready to see the people and preach
Right.
and do what we do. Church equals fellowship. Church equals togetherness. But God has used Monique to help me be cautious and to help me see it. She's a female and she's Black. So she sees it differently than I do. And she's able to be an advocate for the minorities in our church and in our community to say we gotta be careful. So boil that down to simple protocols of, man, we have sections that'll be closed. We have masks available. We got hand sanitizer everywhere. We have distancing between. We pre-registered online, so we know the number to expect, which is crazy. Who thought you'd ever reserve your seat for church? But we're going to do that for a period of time to just, not because we'll turn anyone away at the door. We would never do that, but it gives us an ability to prepare for X number of people in the room and how we need to space them around the building. But even here, at First Baptist Woodstock, it wasn't a bunch of old white guys deciding that. Monique Johnson has spoken into that process like a true professional, but as a Christian sister that was able to bring things to the table that it would have been different if it would have been a bunch of old white men deciding this. You following me? So I've seen that. I've lived the value of diversity on my team. And that's a team I'm grateful God's building here. You've been that kind of guy. You've championed, you know who you are, and you're willing to work with people who are different from you. The more that happens in this country, the better we will all be. Hey, Dewey, a rising tide lifts every boat in the harbor. Black boat, white boat, Republican boat, Democrat boat. A rising tide lifts every boat in the harbor. Can we not think of policies that benefit all God's people in America? Can we not get there? That's what I long for. And I'm excited about June 15th. I got to give you shorter answers on our next one, man. I'm sorry.
No,
But
no, no,
it's just,
not at all. This is absolutely splendid. I couldn't wait to have this conversation. I'm going to let you go, but I want you to tell us. I don't know if you remember that Mother's Day sermon, but
yeah.
just by way of encouragement, as we get ready to bring this one to a close, I want you to, if you can remember some of the tenets of that sermon, just as words of encouragement, inspiration to those who are watching. I'm gonna give you that final word to share, just some excerpts of that message.
Well, I remember it was called Motherhood and the Grace of God. That's what God put in my heart. And I talked about, imagine if you were the mother of Ahmaud Arbery today. Imagine this Mother's Day with your son no longer with you. And I really made it an appeal to white people to pause and to lament and to be willing to mourn on behalf of Ahmaud Arbery's mother. And I mentioned two other mothers as well. But I talked about how white people need to realize this is not a time to say, well, let's let justice run its course. Well, I mean, of course, we all want justice, but the optics of this are so disappointing. There's a time to stand up prophetically and say justice won't happen if we don't demand it and call for it as a people. The system is what's broken here, and we need to courageously, but with Christ-like love, protest a system where this could happen in this country. And so, I mean, that was what was in my heart that day. Is still in my spirit, Dewey. I pray that through friends like you and Pastor Christian Norman, who's on our team, we're going to have a series of online dialogues. I'm going to interview Christian a few times for our people. Again, First Baptist Woodstock is majority Caucasian, but now our staff, we have two people on our lead team that are not Caucasian. So I'm going to begin to do a series of talks with them in front of our church about, Christian, tell me, when you say Black Lives Matter, what does that mean? Help me understand it. Christian, tell me what it's like to be a first grader walking into a public school room where most of the kids don't look like you, and how few of the people in this room have felt that. Things like that. So Dewey, I'll end where I start. It's back to you. The best preaching is the preaching where the preacher is preaching from the overflow of something he feels deep inside of him. The worst preaching, the driest preaching, the most awful preaching is a lecture-based intellect. Oh, tell me something that you've lived. And I'm living in my community a desire to be a kingdom man, seeing God's kingdom come for all people. And that's what I preached on Mother's Day.
Jeremy Morton, man, you're just an incredible human being.
Get out of here, man. Well,
no,
thank
man,
you.
I'm not. I don't blow smoke, man. I'm gonna tell you the truth, and I appreciate you. And I'm honored to call you friend. I'm honored to see what God is doing in you and Carrie's life, and and to
Amen.
see the man, the husband, the father, the preacher, the pastor, and just the human being you are, man. And I thank God for you. I thank God for our friendship. 25 years, man. Almost 25 years. And I thank
Crazy,
God
isn't it?
for you, man. So thanks for
Thank you,
thanks
Pastor.
for thanks for sharing today, man. I look forward to hearing what you're gonna preach on Sunday. I'll be tuning in. Give
Amen.
the wife my love, man. And I just hope that people who watch were inspired by this. Please follow Pastor Jeremy D. Morton. You can follow him on all things social media. His handle is there. This is somebody who's just not talking the talk, he's walking the walk. And may our relationship, may our conversations, give you hope that we can love authentically and have respect authentically and have appreciation authentically and learn and
Yeah.
grow from each other. So these are terrible times. You may not see this on CNN or Fox, but I want you to know that there's people who love Jesus Christ, who authentically
Amen.
love each other and want this world to be changed. So you've been tuned
Hey,
into One-on-One today. Go ahead, brother.
in closing, do you remember when you were at Beulah Land, you had on your business card a practical word for a perilous world? You remember that?
Are
You
you
remember those?
are you kidding me? How you
So what you're doing, you're giving practical words for the perilous world. And that's the truth. That's
are
what we
you
want to do. You remember
are
those
you
days.
do you know how long that's been?
I
Do you know how
copied it.
long that's been?
Hey, listen, true story. I got that card, went back to Warner Robins, and I said, Reverend Jeremy Morton, a practical word for a perilous world. True story. I copied it. Man, the white preachers, they weren't producing anything good in those days. Nothing good. That's why I had to follow you, man. That's why I had to follow you. I love it.
Man, I love you, man. Thank you. Thank you for being who you are, brother. I can't wait till we can connect again and spend some
Amen.
time together. Give Carrie my love. Give the kids our love. Hey,
Love
fam,
it,
you've been
brother.
watching One-on-One, this special edition with Jeremy Morton and yours truly. I hope you've been blessed. Hope you've been inspired. We're going to get through this. God's going to heal our land, and may love be ours. Love your neighbor as yourself as we love God. Until we see you next time, take care. May God bless you. Peace. Appreciate you, brother.
Washington is working really well for the folks who are well connected. But for people in the communities that I serve and people sitting around their kitchen table right now, I don't think it's working well. I still believe in the American dream, but there's a disconnect between the American people and what we're getting in Washington. We're seeing how this is working, and so I would challenge the people of Georgia to try something different. I'm Raphael Warnock, and I